It is a great honor for me to be today here. Thank you all for coming. Voy a estar hablando en inglés para que así Deborah no necesite traducción. We're going to start off the name of this literary festival. Sorry, before I get ahead of myself. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Matadero. Thank you, everybody here. Friends who crossed the city to come and listen to the great Deborah Levy. So since this literary festival is called First Chapter, we're going to start off with Deborah reading an excerpt of her new book. It's this book, El hombre que lo vio todo. As Patricia pointed out, Deborah goes back to fiction. This novel has been nominated to the Man Booker, and that's no surprise because it's the third book by Deborah that's been nominated to the Man Booker. And so Deborah is going to start off reading, and then we're going to pick it up from there.
Okay. Buenas tardes. Bonsoir à tous. So I don't have my English book with me, so I'm reading from a Kindle. I'm not reading my phone. Okay. Abbey Road, London, September 1988. And the person speaking is a man. He is 28 and he is called Saul Adler. I was thinking about how Jennifer Moreau had told me I was never to describe her beauty, not to her or to anyone else. When I asked her why I was silenced in this way, she said, because you only have old words to describe me. This was on my mind when I stepped onto the zebra crossing with its black and white stripes at which all vehicles must stop to allow pedestrians to cross the road. A car was coming towards me, but it did not stop.
Thank you, Deborah. So I want to ask you about Saul, about this young protagonist of this novel.
Yes.
Saul struggles to bring order to his own narrative, as we see in this beginning of the novel. Tell me about your struggles to bring order to narrative, not only your own, but also like fiction. Because I mean, the novel is built in a very artful way. So tell me about.
Yeah, so to write a novel is really to be like an architect. You have to make the structure of this building. And the reason we rewrite is because sometimes the building falls down. So what I kind of like about writing is that you can build, it falls down, then you build it up again until it's the perfect design. And for Saul Adler, he is a very beautiful man. I wanted to write about male beauty because it seems that most novels look at female beauty. But if I look at a Caravaggio, I really can take a big pleasure in the beauty of his male subjects. So I turn around the stereotype, and I have the man very beautiful, and he's a feeling man. He feels things very deeply, and he's a thoughtless and careless man as well. And the book, in a way, is stretched over 30 years. It's almost like he's trying to cross this road for 30 years. We meet him at 28, and the book ends when he's 58. So that's a lot of time to cover.
Building a novel, you talk about it as a space, something that you put blocks and then you're looking for stability. You started off as a playwright.
Yes.
How did theater writing influence or changed your way of thinking about novels and prose writing in general?
So I trained to be a playwright, and all my early work was for the theatre, starting very small. So in Britain it would be in small rooms and pubs, off Broadway. And then gradually I wrote for the Royal Shakespeare Company. I was one of the first few women to actually write for the Royal Shakespeare Company. When it came to writing my first novel, it was because the theatre is very collaborative. Everybody is working together to make this piece. And there was a part of me that wanted to be on my own, just sit in a room on my own and roll up my sleeves and get my hands on language and to create something that I was in control of all the meanings. Because theatre, the beauty of theatre, is that everybody is making the meanings. But how it influenced me is that voice is very important in all my books. And I think the theatre also made me a fast editor of my work. Because if you are sitting in rehearsals in theatre and you're the writer, and you have very skilled actors saying your words, and you write a bad line, a weak line, and this line dies in their mouth, you feel so humiliated. You very quickly write a better line. And so the editing I learned really from the theatre.
Do you think you have like an actress inside yourself, like with these? You're often quoted when you talk about living autobiography, as saying that it's you and it's not you. So that sounds to me a bit like the answer an actress would.
Is this working now? Hello?
Yes.
You couldn't hear me? Oh, okay. So you okay at the back? Yeah. Just scream if you can't hear. Oh, I can hear this working now. No, I'm not an actress. Because I worked in the theatre for those years, in my 20s, it is such a particular skill. If there's a similarity, it's the writer has to inhabit another body, live in a character.
And play.
And sort of bring them to life. But doing that in language and writing is different from doing it on the stage.
While you were training early, you met Derek Jarman, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Derek Jarman was before I was a student. It was in the gap between school and university. It was 1978. And in those days, there was no such thing as a kind of gap year where you went to, I don't know,
India.
South America to form your character in a canoe, paddling over a waterfall. My father, he had 3 jobs to support his family. And in that year, I worked in an art cinema. Not so, I think there are art cinemas in this building. It was called The Gate Cinema. I was 17, I was 18. I was just making the popcorn, scooping the ice cream, and we were showing Derek Jarman's early film, Jubilee. And I was going to study literature. But Derek Jarman was a very cultured, very kind, enchanting and curious person. And he didn't feel above speaking to this usherette, this young woman I was then. And I had just gone to see an exhibition by the German sculptor Joseph Beuys. And I thought it was incredible. It had blown my mind. And I was talking to Derek about this, and I was thinking that maybe I didn't want to read literature. And he said to me, why don't you train at Dartington College of Arts? Because then you will read literature, you will have what we today call an interdisciplinary arts education. So really I had an avant-garde arts education without knowing what it was, for 4 years.
So you worked as a playwright, and then you wrote your first novel, and you were telling me that it has just been published in Germany, and Deborah came to Madrid and flew from Berlin or Hamburg to Barcelona and then came to Madrid. So she was telling me that on the plane she was reading her first book and was sort of... so tell me a little bit how you felt about that book, and also how do you feel about your previous works, even your Living autobiography? Have you reread it recently? Or?
Yes, I do. I read from it all the time. So my books are translated quite widely now in the world, and the point of writing for me is to is for my writing to reach out to you, not just to speak to my own island, So I really try to do many of the events for my book, to thank my publishers, to thank the translators. It's such a big endeavor to translate and publish a book in a country where no one's heard of you, right? So I am really very grateful and moved, and it's the point of my life. Beautiful Mutants is the title of the very first novel I wrote at 25. So I was wearing silver platform boots. I had a lot of eyeliner. I was smoking. It was written on a typewriter. I was furious. It was the Margaret Thatcher years. And then it was translated into German just recently. I'm 63, and I wrote the book at 25.
And you're wearing beautiful boots.
So thank you. So I was looking at this book, and I thought, oh well, there are lots of mistakes as a 25-year-old writer in the book. It has a great spirit. There's some pages that I could never write again. The pages that work. I think I could never write in that same way again. Feverish, frantic, And it was amazing to read from it in Hamburg and in Berlin, and then to change to Barcelona and Madrid for The Man Who Saw Everything, which was published in 2019 in Britain.
So Soul also is, the eyeliner is also kind of a thing for Soul. And Soul travels, so the protagonist of the book, of this last book, travels to Eastern Germany. And it's 1988, and the wall's still up. And it made me think of the first book you published on living autobiography, Things I Don't Want to Know, where you write about a visit you took to Poland, a trip you took to Poland that very same year, 1988. Tell me a little bit about that experience and how it sort of, you wrote about it in that book, and now, it's not Poland, it's East Germany, but it's the other side of the wall, and...
That's so true. So it was my first experience of Eastern Europe. It was the communist era. People were very tired, very exhausted, very scared, and amazing art happening, incredible theater, incredible visual art. In fact, two of my book covers have been, the artists are Polish, and they're both Andrzej Bukowski and Andrzej Klimowski. And I do write about that trip. But my eye is on something else. I think it in the autobiography, it's watching a soldier say goodbye to his mother and to his sister and to his girlfriend, and how he kisses each one. So the mother is kissed on the hand, the sister is kissed on the cheek, and the girlfriend is kissed on the lips. So I write quite a lot about that. By the time I get to East Berlin, 1988, for my generation, we grew up with the Berlin Wall. I'd never been to East Germany. I really wish I had. It was a sort of mysterious place. It had graffiti on one side of the wall in the west, and then this whole other country that, what's happening there?
The other side.
So when I was writing this book, it was sort of around 2016, I thought that I would I would have Saul, as a minor historian, visit East Germany just before the wall comes down. He's researching cultural resistance to Nazism, cultural resistance to fascism. He's looking at the organizations that managed to do this in one way or another. And I was very keen not to write the stereotypes of the GDR. Obviously, there's the Stasi and everything else, but I wanted to research and get right just everyday life. What fruit was coming in? Where did the bananas come from? How did people shop? What did they put their shopping in? And I discovered that a tin of pineapple was a very precious thing to have at that time. So I thought, Saul he doesn't think enough about other people. So I'm going to have his host, the mother of his translator, ask him to bring a tin of pineapple from the west into the east, because she wants to make a birthday cake for her daughter, Luna. And of course, Saul forgets to bring the pineapple. And it's a very big moment, and it goes through all the book, in fact. Yeah.
So we're not going to give away the rest of the plot, but one of the things that you wrote in Things I Don't Want to Know, during your trip and stay in Poland in 1988, you met this theater director who said to you, to speak up is not to speak louder, but to express a wish. And it seems to me like this idea has, is present in all of your books, like the wish for the pineapple can, or the wish for the perfect house, or, so many other forms. So tell me about this encounter with this theater.
Sofia Kalinska was a brilliant actress and director. She had worked with Cantor, the director. So for my generation, when we first saw Cantor on the stage in London, it was incredible, and she was one of his actresses, and she was directing a production of Medea. And in that incredible way that Polish artists sort of approached the costumes, Medea, the belly was cut out of her dress. It was very interesting. But Sophia, she said, I don't want from her actors, this is what I learned as a writer, okay? I don't want false emotion. So I don't want you crying all of the time, your voice shaking, a pretense at emotion. Because a way you can speak in a very hard, clear way and have high emotion, like I'm trying to do now. So she said, and that was from her history of Poland, because people had suffered so much. Don't pretend. You have to get it right. She really would not have any sentimentality, and that was a lesson I learned in my living autobiography, the 3 books I wrote. So that's the experience of being 40, 50, and 60, which are not documented, 50 and 60, very much in a woman's life. And I thought it would be interesting to do that.
You set out, when you first started with your living autobiography, you set out to sort of George Orwell's essay, Why I Write, was at the very heart of the idea. So
yes.
How did you sort of think, okay, I'm going to respond to George Orwell?
So maybe you have books on your shelves that you've never read, or that you've just sort of opened. You've looked at them and then you've put them back. And there was a collection of George Orwell's writing with his essay that was published in 1946, Why I Write. And one day, I just picked it up off the shelf and I read it. It's very short. And he had found, he had 4 headings for what motivates him to write. Political purpose, historical impulse, sheer egoism, aesthetic enthusiasm. So I thought, I think those stand. I mean, the language is a bit strange, aesthetic enthusiasm. But why don't I steal his titles and see what happens? And I will write, I'll write about a female writer and why she writes. So I put up political purpose on the screen, and then to my astonishment, the line that I write is something like, that spring, when life was very hard and I could not see where there was to get to, and I was at war with my lot, I cried most on escalators at train stations. And I'm looking at this writing, and I'm looking at political purpose, And I'm thinking, what? How is this anything to do with political purpose? But I was interested. It interested me. And one of the really strange things about writing, and writers will know this in the audience, is that sometimes you can write a really beautiful line or paragraph, but it doesn't really interest you. It's just, you just think, because you know you have to write the next line. So you sort of admire it for a bit, and you think, you know, this is really boring. But this interested me, and I thought, okay, keep going. And I did. I kept going, and I was finding a voice in the first person to steer what was going to become my living autobiographies. It was an intimate voice and a formal voice together. And I owe that to George Orwell.
The political is present in your writing, but one could say that it's present in a very particular form. Perhaps, you know, going back to the very famous feminist line, "The personal is political." So it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you take this to your books in many different ways. And even this example of this woman struggling through that spring and crying on the stairs is yet another form of sort of vindicating that the personal is political, that the personal history, the family history, is also political history. It's entangled. So I want to ask you about that. And also, I want, you know, Saul's father in your novel, The Man Who Saw Everything, is an old Bolshevik. He's a true believer in the communist ideals. Saul grew up terrified about the physical strength of his father and of his brother. I know that your father was imprisoned in South Africa for his activities to fight against apartheid. And I wonder how, you know, the political history in your family sort of, you know, also the idea that, you know, he was fighting in the right side, right, of history.
Yeah.
So,
yes. So I was born in South Africa, and my father was a political prisoner for 4 years, from when I was 5 to 9, and then we left, and I lived in England ever since. So the struggle for human rights in apartheid South Africa is a big political history. But I never wanted to write about it because I never really thought my own story is important. And I still don't, is the truth. There are more important, much more important stories than my own. But here's the thing. I had stolen George Orwell's heading, Historical Impulse. And I thought, well, you know, you have to honor that. You know, you talk to yourself when you write. You have to actually honor that. So the historical impulse, I wrote about my childhood in South Africa for the first time and the last time. And that opened up a lot for me. It really did. I had to find a way of, from a child's point of view, at the child's eyes, looking at the struggle for human rights. So Saul's father is nothing like my father.
no,
I mean, my father was pretty dogmatic. You know, he was a historian. This is true. I grew up with history. My father taught Hegel and Comte and Heidegger and Engels and Marx, and he would try at the breakfast table to introduce us to Hegel as if he was our cousin. So that to make it interesting for us, so that in the end, we felt we could knock on his door and ask for a cup of sugar. But Saul's father, he really is a Stalinist, and he has this beautiful and effeminate son, and he has a very old-fashioned masculinity, which Saul sees as the Berlin Wall. He has to jump over. He has to escape from ideas about how to be a man. He's not interested in those ideas, and nor am I. So in that sense, there is something of that political history. But he makes up with his father towards the end. Writing, again, is so interesting. If you try and find something good in a character that you are encouraging readers to not like, it's a very liberating thing. If you think about someone you really dislike, and then you set yourself the challenge of finding something quite attractive about them, or some small thing they do that's kind of you like. This makes it all much more complicated. And so I want my characters to be as complicated as we all are in life. There's no such thing as a bad character or a good character, really, in my books. They're more attractive characters, someone we have more empathy with, who we feel for. And similarly, when I was writing the autobiography, my marriage had ended, I was making a new life. I discovered that, and the books are really, they're not about divorce, they're not really about separation, they're about making a new composition, making another sort of life. And I discovered that to write from a position of love is much more subversive, radical, than writing from a position of hate, because there's absolutely nothing to lose with hate, and there's everything to lose with love.
Because you show your vulnerability when you show your love in writing?
Yeah, there's just more to lose. It might not be returned, it might not endure. So back to Poland, Zofia's great note. It's not quite like don't speak louder. Speak the desire. Speak the desire. Find the desire and speak it. Now, all actors have to do this, right, on stage. They will sit with the director. What does this character want? What's standing in their way of getting it? Kind of thing. And I ask the same questions of my books. What does the character desire? What's stopping them from getting it? Is it societal? Is it something internal? Is it both? Etc.
Deborah, you spoke about toxic masculinity and sort of the role that Saul rejects, that way of being a man that his father and his brother have. So I want to know a little bit more about that, because that way of being a man can also be attractive in a way. And also, I want to ask you if you feel that there's also a way of being a woman, a way of being a liberated woman, and these will take us to Simone de Beauvoir.
It all
But,
comes back to Simone de Beauvoir in the end. Okay, so in The Man Who Saw Everything, I'm looking at an authoritarian regime. And at the moment, we're all looking at authoritarian regimes, right? As they seem to be part of where we are in 2022, alas. I was looking at old male tyrants, narcissistic male tyrants. This is where we are too. And I wanted to explore what that was about in, I wanted to put Saul, someone like Saul, who's very imperfect, into an authoritarian regime. How's he gonna, what's gonna happen there?
navigate.
Okay, so that's one thing. So it wasn't really toxic masculinity, it was authoritarianism. And that Michael Haneke actually in his films explores so well, a film like White Ribbon, I don't know how it translates here. And then a liberated woman, well, I think we need I think that's just like a slogan, you know. And we'll think, oh, we have to be liberated. We have to get, all of us, a little bit closer to living a life that feels possible, that feels nearer ourselves, everyone. So then we say, well, what's stopping us? Is it patriarchy? Is it the traffic lights? What is it? So I never really, I don't really use words like toxic masculinity in my books. But it's true that it's an interesting subject, and it's true that the living autobiography it explores freedom. What is that? What does it mean? Through 3 books.
So I interviewed, full disclosure, I interviewed Deborah like a year ago via Zoom, and about the 3rd part of her living autobiography, which was published early this year in Spanish. And we spoke about Simone de Beauvoir because she has written quite a lot about her. And she said to me, well, we both bought tickets on the Freedom train and boarded that train, but then we got off at different stations. So I wanted you to go back to that and explain a little bit, and also the way female writers have been erased, which, you know, is something that you've also written and talked about.
So Simone de Beauvoir, so this is in The Cost of Living, and thank you to my publishers for the translation and of all those 3 books. Yeah, so I say, well, Simone de Beauvoir is my muse. I really admire her, but she wouldn't really admire me. So we both bought a ticket for freedom. We got on the train, but we got off at different stops, because I got off on the platform of marriage and children. I'm very happy to have got off at that stop, and she got off at another stop. But here's the thing that we might share, Simone and myself. She's she has all my respect, Simone de Beauvoir. I know, you know, she was writing a long time ago, but I think she really told the truth. in an extraordinary way. We sort of know that freedom is a destination that you never quite arrive at. So what does that stop look like? We don't really exactly know. And if I did, I probably wouldn't write. Because who says, you know, this is a tricky word, freedom, because it means very different things to different people. But perhaps it's a destination that we sort of think we know what it looks like. And maybe we do arrive, I don't know.
So, Deborah, I am still thinking about those sparkly platforms, silvery platforms that you mentioned from 1988, and they reminded me of those green shoes you bought in Paris while you were writing The Cost of Living. So there's something with shoes.
I do like shoes. And in fact, I wore my green shoes in Barcelona.
Oh, really?
I did.
I missed that.
I took them out again. Yes. So shoes are quite important in my book, The Cost of Living. No, real estate, in fact.
Real estate, yeah.
Yeah. And again, maybe it's a theatrical thing. It's a way of grounding a character, you know.
It's also a way of creating these atmospheres,
yeah.
zooming in and zooming out, which is something you do in your writing very well, indeed. What's the atmosphere you build? You also talk a lot about the space, right? The right house. So let me tell you, for those of you who have not read all of Deborah's book, but in Real Estate, which is the last part of the Living autobiography, Deborah is in search for the perfect house. Have you found it?
Maybe not. In fact, real estate, which is an American term, these strange words together, real and estate, is about the longing for a house. It's about the fantasies we might have. Maybe some of you share them. Of you know, you imagine a villa, and you go, oh yeah, well I've painted the shutters green. There's a pomegranate tree in the garden. There's a river. So it's about unreal estate. All these imagined places that we put into our property portfolios, but they totally imagined. It's an existential book. It's too, really, because, you know, it's not really about like arriving at the perfect house and how you might decorate it. It discusses money. Which is a very taboo subject, I think, actually. We could do with more books that discuss money. It's such an interesting subject, and I think it secretly fascinates all of us. There's such a lot of power relationships, such a lot of humiliation, such a lot of arrogance, such a lot of everything in that subject. How do we measure value? How, at 60, you know, have you, the question would be something like, well, has the narrator loved enough? Has she been loved enough? Are the books good enough? All these sort of existential questions, are they good enough? Have I done enough with my life? What do I bequeath? What do I value? And what I value are human relations and imagination. And my real estate are my books. They are my home. They sort of are my properties.
And you built them.
And I built them, yeah.
Okay, last thing. I know, so Deborah now spends quite a lot of time in Paris, in France. She says that's where she goes to write, which I find very glamorous and fun. In The Man Who Saw Everything, so Soul, Deborah read the beginning of the book, and it's 1988. And then, flash forward, and it's 2016, and it's the summer of Brexit. So I wanted to ask Deborah about where did she spend that summer, and how she remembers that, and whether the choice of spending more time in France is somehow related to the whole Brexit folly.
Bien sûr. Yes, it became important to me to really have somewhere in Europe. I rent a small studio in Paris. It's a very good place to write, to try and learn another language. I've just finished my next novel in Paris. The title is August Blue. And you're absolutely right. There is so much. When I was writing The Man Who Saw Everything, at that time in 2016, that whole sort of atmosphere of rising nationalism, of authoritarian regimes, of closing borders, of building walls, because Trump was also happening in 2016. So building walls was very much in the news. But then the interesting thing, because I'm interested in the poetic as much as the political, I work with the two together, is, as I've said many times, and please do forgive the repetition, is that walls are very solid, and the Berlin Wall certainly built from concrete, but they're really built from fear. So I write quite a lot about those two things in The Man Who Saw Everything.
Yeah. So there are 4 minutes left, and we're going to open up for questions if you have any. I must also say that Deborah will be signing books, and if you would like to keep that question for yourself and just ask her while she's signing, she'll be very happy to talk to any of you. This is not to discourage anybody from making a question, okay? It's just Deborah asked me to say this. So, any questions? Oh, come on.
You can ask me when I sign a book.
Okay, so we'll just leave it here. Let me say thank you very much, Deborah. It's been truly a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you for your great questions.
Thank you for Patricia, thank you Rosa, thank you Matadero, thank you Capítulo 1, and thank you all for sharing this evening with us. Thank you.